Have you ever felt like you were walking the path that wasn't truly your own? Perhaps you've pursued a career or a lifestyle that was expected of you, only to realize that truly deep inside, there was a calling pulling you in a different direction. And what if that calling led you to transform your life entirely? Today, we're going to explore an incredible journey of breaking free from societal expectations, trusting your intuition, and stepping into your true purpose. This is a story of overcoming limiting beliefs, mastering your mind, and turning shyness into confidence to speak your truth. It's also about realizing that just because we have formal education in one part, there's only really one part of our equation, that self-education, spiritual growth, and personal mastery can lead to a life of profound fulfillment. And so if you've wondered how to align your life with true purpose, this episode is going to guide you on that journey. And before we get into today's episode, let's come to grips about one other thing, and that is inevitably there will come a time in your life when you will hit a wall. Whether it's a marriage that's not working, a career or a business that's stagnated, or your personal life has flatlined. So if you're dealing with any of these or a combination of them and are finally fed up with where your life is at, then allow me to help you get clear about what needs to be done and how to do that so you can get on with living the life you were meant to live. Just go to theawakenedman.net and download the free Setting the Compass exercise to get started today. And with that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life. Many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement and your host, Alan DeMonso. So let me ask you, have you ever questioned whether the path you're on is truly your own or simply the one laid out before you by others? What would it take for you to step into a life that feels aligned with your deepest callings? And how often do you truly trust your intuition over logic, societal expectations? And so what changes or could unfold in your life if you let your intuition guide you just a little bit more often? It requires courage to question the path that you're on and to overcome limiting beliefs that hold you back and to reprogram your mind for self-mastery. But imagine the possibilities when you do. When you step out of the shadows of expectations and into the light, and it's not just about achieving success in the traditional sense, it's about finding fulfillment and living life that resonates with your true self. And just as it did for my guest today. So allow me to introduce my guest. Dr. Agi Keramidas is originally from Greece and has been living in the UK since 2010. And his personal development journey has taken him from a dentist with a master's degree to becoming a podcaster, knowledge broker, and an author. And despite his formal education and being a critical thinker, he is a big believer in the immense power of self-education and at the same time, being deeply spiritual. He's the author of 88 Actionable Insights for Life and the host of the Personal Development Mastery podcast. And his mission is to inspire an audience to stand out and to take action toward living a purposeful and fulfilling life. Welcome to the show, Agi. How are you, my friend?
Alain, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. And I will say straight away, I appreciate how you prefaced this with your introduction, this conversation. It is incredible.
Yes, and I as well. I'm
really
so grateful to be able to come across, touch past in this journey of being a podcaster and hosting so many profound people on my show. And you're another one of those individuals. And I just love your story. And here we talk a lot about everyone being on their own hero's quest or their hero's journey. And so while I tickled everybody with a little bit of your story, do tell us about that time in your life when you knew things weren't great. And what did you do about that? And how did that experience shape you into the man you are today and the work you're doing?
It's a great way to start. And there have been two distinct periods like that in my life. And I will start with the one that is the first one. And in many ways, it led to the second one that happened a few years afterwards. And that was, I'm Greek originally. I grew up and studied to be a dentist as my mom And after a few years of working there, I realized that my life was really not how I wanted it to be. And I don't mean externally, because on the outside, it would look like I'm doing really well. I had my dental practice, I was engaged to be married, I had my family support me, and so
Mhm.
on. But inside, I felt empty, really. I felt like this is not what I want to do. I didn't want to, in a way, repeat the kind of life that my parents had, living in my hometown. It was something that didn't feel right for me. I was in my 30s, early mid 30s at that time, and it took me a long time to realize that this feeling that I was feeling was actually a calling for something else. And the reason why I was feeling discontent with what I was doing was not because, I was hating it or anything like that. It was, I
Mhm.
feel, because I had a different path or purpose, if you want, to be, discovered or uncovered in the future. So after it took a while, but after a long deliberation, I decided to leave my home country, Greece, and move to the UK because of that. As I said, a calling. It was like I felt something drawing me there. Everything about England was fascinating to me for some reason. I couldn't explain it, but I took all this as signs that there's something for me to explore at the very least, if not find something there. I took the decision to leave behind my life as I knew it in Greece, my home country, my family, my fiancée, my dental practice, everything basically. So I got two suitcases and a one-way ticket to England, where I had already an offer to work as a dentist there. So in a new country, new environment on my own. So that was a very, and I will answer because I liked very much one thing that you asked in your question about this transition was how has that shaped me as a man? And for me, that was probably the most important thing I have done for that has shaped me as a man, simply because I realized very soon after
Mm.
I changed country that I must rely on myself. And that gave me a lot of confidence because I had to deal with everything on my own. There was no, I couldn't call on my mom and say, "Can you help me?" or whatever. And everything was up to me. And that's taking on that responsibility gave me a great deal of tools and mental tools to face on other things afterwards. But yeah, that is in a nutshell what the transition, that was
What I think
15
is
years ago
thank you
when
so much
I
for sharing
moved
that,
away.
Agi. What I find so inspiring about your story is similar to now, I didn't have as big a move as you did, but similar to your story, when I was a young man coming out of culinary school, I was fortunate enough to find a role for me to jump into, but it wasn't in my hometown or even in my home province, and I had to move away. And I can remember making that decision to take on this new career and to take that role. And similar to what you said, this is if I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it on my own. And now I didn't have some of the other pieces on to deal with, like a fiance. Yes, my parents, I think, were happy about me getting on my career. But talk a little bit about the impact on that had. Now we understand a little bit on the impact for you, but what about your family and your fiance and having to deal with that as well? Because I think at times men in general will not make a hard decision like that because they want to protect. So let's talk a little bit about that aspect of this transition.
I loved your question, Len, and it's something that I'm not sure whether I have spoken about this before, so it's great. There are two separate elements. That my parents very supportive, so that I'm really grateful for that. They saw that I was passionate about it. They also saw that I had a job offer in the UK, so I was not going as a refugee. It was something that everything was ready for me. I just needed to work, fulfill my commitment, my professional commitment. So they did support me, and I was blessed. My fiancée, on the other hand, was very different because she did not want to change countries. She was happy living the life that I was unhappy living, She wanted to be close to her family. She had a secure, stable job, and she wanted to keep that. That led us to split up. And the important thing here, of course, that was very difficult for me. I still remember the last time I saw her, I didn't think that a person could cry so much as I saw her crying. So that image of her remained with me. And to be honest, it took me many years. And I'm opening up here and straight away because it is deep. It took me many years to get over that feeling of guilt that I had for a series of years, that I left her behind and I did what I wanted to do and I ruined her life or whatever thoughts were coming up that were creating guilt. So I think that is an important thing to discuss here. And I do believe now, on hindsight, and now that I have made a peace with what has happened, that this was for the best interest of everyone. So it was not, I did not, yes, she went through pain, a lot of pain at that time when she saw me move on my own to a different country. But on the other hand, that the life that she wanted to live, and from what I learned afterwards, she did that. She did the kind of marriage and family that she wanted to have. So it was necessary for her to go through that emotional pain. So I think everyone in the end, and that's really what now on reflection, each of us is in the end responsible for their own life and actions. And if someone will get hurt for a period of time as a result of that, I think that's part of life. At the moment I see it that when you do it with the right intentions, you do not want to hurt the other person. There is no malice involved. It's just, I want to follow my dream. I'm inviting you to come with me. You don't, because you have different dreams. Obviously, our lives are not to go parallel from now on. It went for a few years. Now it is like that. And that's life, really, with all human relationships. Some of them are for a short time, some for longer, some for ever, forever. And we don't know that in the beginning. It's
It sure is. Thank you so
journey,
much for
beautiful
being
journey
vulnerable
to
and open and
explore.
sharing that with us, because I think it is important that for our listeners to understand that there, as I said in the part of the intro, there will come this time when you will hit a wall. Your wall was deciding to follow your calling or not to do that. And that doesn't mean these decisions are ever going to be easy. People may get hurt, most likely will, but it also is the best decision for all. And she had the opportunity, your fiance got the opportunity to live the life that she wished and be happy. And so did you. And I think that is a really important takeaway that I have from this part of your story, is that when there are tough times and we have to make difficult decisions, that as men, we're called to do that. And when we do it with compassion and with care and thought, then we can still make those decisions what's best for all. And so thank you so much for sharing that. And I wanted to pivot a little bit and talk about what you talk about in your bio, about really transforming yourself from this shy individual to being comfortable doing public speaking and even being a podcaster. So what were some of the key steps that you took to overcome your discomfort in these social situations?
Good question. And the discomfort in the social situations was also one of the reasons that I wanted to change. And I will backtrack a little bit and tell you about this. It was a few years, to continue the story, a few years after I had I was living in the UK. I enrolled to do a master's degree in dentistry, so I did a master's degree, and I had just turned 40 at that time, which, as many of us know, especially the ones that have experienced it, there are things that change in a man's life, not only a man's, in a woman's life also, but for men, certainly around that age, there is something happening. So we can go into that or not, but it's okay. For me, what happened was that I found myself finishing this master's degree, graduating, and instead of feeling super motivated and pumped to practice this very high-end knowledge that I had acquired and do all those things with my patients, I found myself completely the opposite. I was not interested. I did not want to do any of that. I was feeling the word that comes to mind is directionless, or like I'm just spinning the wheel and nothing is really happening the way that I want to. So my first to all that is that there must be something wrong with me. Because really right now, this is, again, on the outside, this is success. I had rebuilt a new life and a new career in the UK instead of Greece. But I found myself in a similar situation. And initially I started wondering what's wrong with myself. Thank goodness I didn't stay in that mode for too long, because then I started looking for answers. And that's something that at the very least the master's degree helped me with developing a critical thinking and some self-awareness, so I could look inside for answers rather than trying to find out what of my external environment it is that is causing that. So it led me to personal development. I started reading books, I went to some seminars, eventually I went to a Tony Robbins event in 2017, and that's when big shift happened to me. And to bring it to what you asked me originally in your question, what happened on that at that event was that all my life until then, I was always very reserved and shy and closed person with other people, especially people I didn't know. Actually, and reserved is one way to put it. I was very uncomfortable. That is the truth. And I always have believed that this is who I am. It's my character. I am a shy person, an identity. I didn't think of it like that in those terms at that time, but now I can. At that Tony Robbins event, I realized very clearly, with a very huge emotional reaction I had during the process, that crying on the floor for 1 hour, it was very intense. But I realized anyway, the point was that I realized that this was not who I am, the shyness. This was only merely a set of limiting beliefs. Again, I didn't know they were called limiting beliefs at that time. At that time, I realized that there was a voice at the back of my head, because that's what it was. It was a thought or a voice that was saying, literally, Agi, people are not interested in what you have to say. So there was that dialogue, but on a subtle level. It was not a loud voice, but it was every time I would find myself in a situation with people that I didn't know, that would be triggered, and then you would see Aggie feeling uncomfortable, not saying anything. I remember being in an elevator with a person that I didn't know. I felt terrible. I felt so, because I thought I didn't want to speak. And I don't mean it, but anyway, there are many examples like that to demonstrate how I was. I will tell you one more quickly. The first time I went to a networking event, someone pushed me, said, "You have to go." There was a speech in the beginning, so I sat down and watched the speech. It was very interesting. And then the presenter said, "And now it's time for networking. So we will have 10 minutes for everyone to go and meet someone else." I went to the toilet immediately and spent 10 minutes in the toilet until I made sure that networking thing had finished to return back to the room. That's how uncomfortable it was. When I realized that this was a limiting voice at the back of my head, then that was the very first step. I think it was that awareness that, wow, this is what's causing it. And I realized that this is not how I want to live the rest of my life. I have something of value inside me to share. And then one thing led to the other, and then I found myself in a public speaking course, which was the thing that they took me completely out of my comfort zone. But I realized also that this was exactly what I needed
Love that story.
to do.
Lots of profound changes happen at Tony Robbins events, and obviously taking some public speaking courses too really help us. And really some of the takeaway I'm getting from hearing you talk about is something else that you wrote about in your book. And that's really about trusting our intuition. You keep referencing this voice, this something was guiding you along. And so why is it, do you think, that we don't trust that, our intuition? We don't trust that voice. What does it really take for us to start to do that and trust and take action?
I think the main reason that many people do not trust it is that they have not learned, I would dare say we have been conditioned in many ways, especially in some Western countries like you and I did, not to trust it and to put logic and reason above everything else. So you have to make a decision. You want to make a decision, you do a pros and cons and put everything in. It has to be logic. And I think a big reason why many of us don't trust is because they don't know it. They don't recognize it, or they don't believe its value. The thing with trusting, it's a difficult thing to explain because there is no logic behind it. It is some kind of a decision you make that there is something that I will trust and I will follow. And with intuition, that's something, it is not abstract. And I do believe that all of us have felt it. It might not have been a very loud or clear voice. And actually, the word voice, I don't think it is, in my experience anyway, it is not a voice, the intuition is more like a knowing. And it's always it's a heart, or it comes from the heart, or it bubbles up from it is not like a thought. So that's how at least from my experience, that's how it feels, the intuition. If I can say, characteristic of that helps me recognize it, and from others I've spoken, they agree. It has a optimistic or think or good feeling, outcome, or whatever. It is a knowing that has a positive, let's say, positive energy about it. It is not the other side, which is the rational mind or the fear that will appear when it is a thought. It has a different, can I call it vibration? It has a different energy, shall we say, than the intuitive, I was about to say voice, but it is annoying again, I would say. So I think, to answer your question, recognizing that and becoming aware of it more and more is the first step, because you won't trust it before you actually recognize that there is something there for me. I think that's the first step to do. Listen to it, and when you feel it, perhaps write it down. That's what I felt. You don't even have to do anything about it if you want to improve this connection with your intuition. When you feel something that could be intuition, put it on, write it down, and then look at them and see.
Love
is
that
there anything
that
there
advice, and I would
for me to
completely agree
discover?
with you. The moments that of intuition that come for me, it isn't. You're right. It's not really a voice at all. I was going to say it's almost like a nudge. It's just something just to go do something. It's just, and it isn't more of a knowing of it. The annoying side of it is that voice, at least from my experience, and it's usually not a helpful voice. It's can tend to be negative, and I always associate that with my ego trying to protect me, trying to protect itself because it's uncomfortable of what it doesn't know. And so just taking the opportunity, and I like the idea of just writing it down and taking a moment and looking at what is being called up from you. And really this ties into the other part that you've been talking about also so far today, is all of us having these limiting beliefs. And it's lots of the work that we do here at the Awakened Man is helping men unpack the limiting beliefs, and they don't necessarily see them as that. So I just say, let's just talk about your beliefs, and beliefs around money, your beliefs around your profession, about who you are, as you were talking about. And then through those conversations, we start to see where the limitations are. Some of them are pretty broad, like they don't have a lot of framework around it, but other times it's really, the box is really tight. So let's talk a little bit about how these beliefs get so ingrained to us, and what are some significant ways that we can use to help overcome them and really change our lives.
I think where they come from is childhood. The vast majority, especially these kinds of beliefs that we're talking about, that have the ability to sabotage one in their tracks, I believe they come from our childhood up to, I think it's 7 years, where we develop that, or that part of the brain, then they get absorbed. So that's a big topic on its own, to where they come from and what can we do to eliminate them from that level. But that is probably a different conversation. I'm not really the most appropriate person to give those answers on dealing with these things. But bringing it to the actual limiting beliefs that have formed, and we are all adults now listening to the podcast, so we can't go back. What we can do is, first of all, again, similar to what I was saying about intuition, is to become aware of them, of
Hmm.
the beliefs that we have. And there are beautiful exercises. I'm sure you do those with your clients. There are online resources that can help you recognize these beliefs that you have in a very clear manner. Then you look at them, and that's based on the answers that you had given. So I think the first necessary ingredient for that is self-inquiry, the desire to look inside and figure things out. Otherwise, the moment you say, okay, I need to do that work, let me see what are the beliefs that drive my behavior, that drive my results in life, because it all starts from beliefs, from thoughts or patterns of thoughts. By getting the desire to investigate that, then you start looking inside, and then you realize the beliefs, and whether it's many of the beliefs that we have that are limiting
Agreed.
now, at some point earlier in our lives they were not limited. None of us chooses to have limiting beliefs. We keep them on because at some point in the past they served us one way or the other, even when we were children. But I'm sure since that time, each of us have practiced their limiting beliefs in various scenarios in life. So they have established them very well. So let's recognize them first and look at them. And one way that I like looking at beliefs, rather than using the term limiting, which I think it's not the most appropriate term to describe them, what I prefer to do instead is, when I have my beliefs, do I say, does this belief serve me or does it not serve me anymore? I don't have to
Yes.
label them as limiting, because that maybe creates other feelings of guilt or, oh, my
I love that
beliefs are
idea. We talk about a
limiting,
lot
I
about
don't
that as
like it,
well,
and
about
so on.
in how you mentioned maybe at some point this belief served us, and it did, and it served us well. And now the question is, does this belief still serve me? And maybe it does in some aspects, and in other times it doesn't. And it's to have that self awareness. And because I think it's important that we recognize that anything that we're talking about here isn't, don't paint with too broad of a brush here. There's every scenario will bring up a different things to consider. And so I like the direction that you're going with this and having us really consider what's going on for us first in order to take that next step. And so that really leads me into to your book. I love the book, 88 Actionable Insights for Life. But it's got a ton of advice in there. But tell me about what inspired you to
Hmm.
write this book, and give us one insight that you believe would be the most profound impact on someone's life from that book. I know.
That last question is a difficult one, and you know it. But the book is here, the 88 Actionable Insights. What inspired me to write? It's a great question, and that again, I wanted to write a book for a long time, years. I had never an idea of what to write about, though. Once I started doing the podcast, my podcast, Personal Development Mastery, after a couple of years, I realized that I had enough material purely from my podcast to somehow convert into a book. However, I still didn't know what to do with it. And then one day, literally, it came to me, Alan. It really came to me. I was just looking at my bookshelf and I discovered a book that I had for years, that it said something like, oh, I remember it, the title was 100 Property Investing Tips. So that guy had collated tips from different person on, and you could pick them up and do something. If you invest in property, you could use these tips. And I had that book for years. And that particular day, I got inspired. I can write 100 personal development tips. I don't need to put any order in them. That's very easy. Eventually, 100 became 88, and that, in a way, again, it came to me, that number, and I thought, okay, then if it comes to me, there must be a reason. So I left it at 88, and then I narrowed down the focus rather than tips, because not many people, especially personal development, is not a sexy topic as the title personal development. There is also some bad rep about it from some cycles. So I didn't want to use that. I decided to put actionable insights, because it is exactly that. It is things that the reader can take and pick up if they resonate with him. He can pick it up and implement in their life, because self-mastery and personal development require action. It's not about reading. You can read every single book there is on there. If you don't do anything with the knowledge, nothing changes. It is not about how much information you have in your head. That's useless if you don't do anything. So that's why my book has actionable insights, so that they can be implemented straight away. And you asked me about one. I will tell you
Perfect.
one that it for me has made a profound effect in my journey, and many other people. I'm sure when I tell you what it is, you say, "Oh, yes, of course." And that is morning routine. Having a morning routine. I never had before teen. I never had not a conscious morning routine anyway. I did have. Every one of us has a morning routine, but for most people, it's not an intentional, empowering morning routine. They might wake up and turn on the TV and watch the news, for example, which is one of the worst things you could do probably, or scroll on social media immediately. So having a consistent, and when I say consistent, I don't mean rigid. There was always flexibility because life happens, but consistency means daily, as the name says, daily routine. So even if I have to shorten it down to 10-15 minutes because I don't have time that day, I will still do some elements of it, and I will mention briefly. Meditation is one of them. Journaling is another. Some sort of physical exercise like yoga or push-ups or whatever it is that it's in my schedule or in my desire anyway for that day. And some other elements like that I have realized that they really set the tone for the day ahead. And when you start the day in a good way, there are much more possibilities that your day will be a good day, a productive day, a successful day, rather than starting and with what we say, a bad day starts from the beginning, then everything gets to worse. So that time in the morning is the probably only opportunity that each of us has to be in control of their day before the children wake up, before we go to the office, before anything else. Then it's not up to us. We don't know what life will throw at us. But that half an hour in the morning or whatever you choose to devote to that is truly yours, and it can
I
really
completely
change your
agree
life
with you
once
there,
you
Agi, on
implement
that.
it,
That
if you
makes
haven't
total
already.
sense. And when I find the days that I don't dedicate my routine, my morning routine, to doing at least parts of it, and I'm glad to hear you say that it's about being consistent, not rigid. There are individuals out in the world today that are very structured and they can do, and that's just part of their makeup. For somebody like me, I have 4 or 5 different parts to it. Sometimes it's all, they all participate. I do all of it. Other times it's just part of it. But one thing that is the goal is to be consistent, and I appreciate that insight for sure. I remember looking at your, go ahead.
I will add very quickly. There is one of those 88 actionable insights that talks about the minimum morning routine.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I will just
I was
share that
noticing on
because
your
it's
website, you have a picture
similar
of
to what you
yourself
were
and you're
saying.
standing beside a stack of books almost as tall as you are. And well, obviously these are probably some pretty profound books. And so I'm not sure if you're in between books right now or if there's one on a nightstand. My question for you is, what book has had the most impact for you in your life?
There are quite a few actually, and again, trying to find the one that had the most impact is probably an impossible question. But I will tell you one of the most impactful ones. That it was How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie, which I read when I was 41, I think 41 years old, and I thought, oh my god, why did I not read that book as a teenager? It would have changed my life and how I interact with people. So I can't recommend that book enough. It's been for almost 100 years now. I think it is a all-time classic. Definitely a fantastic book. The skills that there are there,
Agreed. I agree.
They should be teaching
Carnegie
those things
also
in school.
from his work there also had speaking courses and leadership courses, and that was one of the books that made a profound difference for me. The other one was Og Mandino is my favorite author, and he wrote a book called The University of Success, and it sits on in my office because it's 50, I think it's 50 of the greatest books ever written. Some of them are the entire book, like The Richest Man in Babylon, and others are key points out of it. But the key of it, the way he set that up, is basically takes you from really being this child, this infant, your first steps into understanding who you are, to becoming a master of your life. And so I'm always curious to see my guests, how their journey has transformed and how the books in their lives have done that. And so the next question I have for you is about mentors, and it's about getting advice. And I know that you coach and you lead others, but this is really about, for you, what has been the best or a profound piece of advice that you've been given throughout your life and that has made an impact and is still using you, and you're still using it today?
Mentors, yes, of course, it's an absolutely essential part of the journey, and we all have mentors, sometimes unknowingly, because we haven't really thought that these people actually mentor us. But when you become intentional about the mentoring and you choose, and that's, I think, the great power of it is that you can choose. And when I say mentor, when we say mentors, it doesn't have to be a not even physical presence. You can watch someone's YouTube channel and be mentored by them and learn things that the other person already has been through, has experienced, and they know them well enough to teach. And then when they teach it, they basically accelerate your journey because you don't repeat the same mistakes. You have a path, shall we say. So mentors are of tremendous value. Oh, as for piece of advice, there are so many really that I'm struggling to find one to share as some kind of piece of advice that I got from mentors as a statement.
I know they can be very, when you have mentors, I like what you said there as well, because when you have mentors, you may, or people are in your life, you don't necessarily at the time see them as mentor, but there was a lesson that they were there to teach us. And then we recognize it after, and then it comes back when we do that introspection. And so I really like how because no one's ever said that before about sometimes the mentors are in our life when we don't realize that they are that, serving that role. When I think of your story, and really, even though you said your mother was a dentist, but at some point, that is mentorship, right? It's that leading, and it was serving you well. And then moving into to the UK, I just can't. I said I moved one province a few hundred miles away. You moved a few thousand. Like, you were truly on your own, and the people you must have encountered at that time in starting your life over in the UK must have been pretty profound as well.
The language was different, everything. But it was an adventure. I always saw it, since you bring it up again, I always saw it as something positive. It was not a path with a red carpet on, no, far from it. I was very much challenged, and there were times that I struggled and I had difficulties, and absolutely. But I never focused on those because I focused on what's good about the change that I've had in my life.
Absolutely.
And that guided me through.
Agi, of
any
everything that
difficulties.
we talked about today, and maybe there was something we didn't get a chance to touch on, what would be the one takeaway you'd want our listeners to have?
The thing we didn't talk about is my podcast, actually, which is, and the reason I'm mentioning it, it's not about plugging it. It is my mission to the world. It is how I express my purpose via the podcast, Personal Development Mastery, which is to inspire people to take some action, to inspire positive change, to inspire them to take a kind of action to change their life, to improve their life anyway. Forget about change. That's up to the individual, but to improve their life. And anyone listening to us right now, for sure they want to improve their life, and that's why they're listening to that. So that's really what I would like to add. So if someone has enjoyed this conversation, there is a lot of topics that I cover on my podcast on how to be a better person or be a better man.
Love
in this
that. Absolutely. And a phenomenal podcast,
situation.
Personal Development Mastery. We want to make sure that folks get a chance to reach out to you on there. But as we wrap things up today, I just want to say thank you so much for helping us really understand about owning our lives, trusting our intuition, and moving forward with actionable steps that allows us to really live a fulfilling life. And so besides the podcast, your Personal Mastery podcast, what's another way that men can get a hold of you, reach out and get in touch with your content?
You can find me on social media. and feel free to message me. I'm very approachable. Tell me you found me from Alain's podcast, and I will be very happy to connect with you. You will find me easily. My name is quite unique. Once you find out how to type it, there is
Excellent.
no other
Love
person
that. I'm going to make sure
called
all of
Agi
your social
Keramidas.
handles are in today's episode, as well as an opportunity to get out and pick up your book. Your book is really profound. Love the way you've structured it, so folks can get a chance to get out and spend some time with you. Once again, thank you so much for being on the show. I truly enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you for the invitation. So did I.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is the Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.